A man walks into a quiet bar and orders a cold beer. He takes the beer over to a table and sits down. After a few sips of his beer, he hears a small voice say, "Nice shoes." He looks around, but he's the only one in the bar except the bartender, who is occupied cleaning the other end of the bar. The man shrugs it off and goes back to his drink. A few minutes later, another small voice says, "Nice shirt." Again, the man looks around but can see nobody. Concerned that his mind is playing tricks on him, he is now on guard, listening for any reoccurrences. After a few minutes, a third small voice says, "Nice pants." This time he is sure it is not his imagination, so he goes up to the bartender and tells him what has happened. "Oh yay, that happens all the time," says the bartender, pointing to the small bowl on the guy's table. "It's the peanuts. They're complimentary." So, there's a traveling salesman who loves to play poker. Every town he visits, he manages to find a game. One night, he's led to the back of a saloon, and seated among the locals is a German shepherd. The guy is surprised to see a dog at a poker table, but the dog appears to be very well behaved, so the salesman sits down to play. Well, after an hour or so, the salesman and the dog are in a showdown. The salesman raises, the dog raises back, the salesman raises again, and the dog calls. The salesman shows his hand, 3 queens. The dog turns over his hand, a flush. The salesman is so impressed, he isn't even mad that he lost the hand. "You know," he says to one of the locals, "not only can that dog play, but he's really pretty good." "Yeah," says the local. "He plays okay, but we usually beat him." "Is that right?" says the salesman. "Yeah," says the local. "Whenever he has a good hand, he wags his tail." A child asked his father, "How were people born?" So his father said, "Adam and Eve made babies, then their babies became adults and made babies," and so on. The child then went to his mother and asked her the same question. She told him, "We were monkeys, then we evolved to become like we are now." The child ran back to his father and said, "You lied to me." His father replied, "No. Your mum was talking about her side of the family." Dave and Fred decide to go golfing at their favorite course. On the 15th hole, Dave hits his golf ball into the woods and finds it in a patch of pretty yellow buttercups. Trying to get his ball back in play, he ends up thrashing every buttercup in the patch. All of a sudden, poof! In a flash and a puff of smoke, a beautiful woman appears. She says, "I'm Mother Nature. Do you know how long it took me to make those buttercups? For doing what you did, you won't have any butter for your popcorn for the rest of your life. And you won't have any butter for your toast. In fact, you'll never have any butter for anything the rest of your life." Then, poof, she disappears. After Dave recovers from the shock, he yells to his friend Fred, "Hey Fred, you won't believe what just happened." "Where are you?" Fred yells back, "I'm in the rough, over here in a patch of pussy willows." Dave shouts back, "Don't swing, Fred. For the love of God, don't swing." There is a white Superman, a black Superman, and a Chinese Superman on top of a skyscraper. They are all having a contest to see who has the longest dick. The white Superman pulls down his tights, and blum, blum, blum. His cock unrolls down the side of the building and across the street. The black Superman says, "That's shit, watch this," and pulls down his tights. Blum, 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 crash. His cock unrolls down the side of the building, across the street and up the next building, then smashes through a window. Now, the white Superman and the black Superman are looking at the Chinese Superman, who by this time is laughing his ass off. So, the black and white Supermen say, "What's so funny? Show us your cock." So the Chinese Superman pulls out his dick, and it's only 3 inches long, but he's still laughing. Puzzled, the black and white Supermen ask, "What the fuck is so funny?" The Chinese Superman says, "There is steamroller coming down street." Paul got off the elevator on the 40th floor and nervously knocked on his Tinder date's door. She opened it and was as beautiful and charming as her profile had said. "I'll be ready in a few minutes," she said. "Why don't you play with Rollo while you're waiting?" She indicated the little dog sitting at her feet. "He does wonderful tricks. He rolls over, shakes hands, sits up, and if you make a hoop with your arms, he'll jump through." Rollo followed Paul onto the balcony and started rolling over. Rollo then shook Paul's hand. Rollo sat up when Paul motioned for him to do so. Paul then made a hoop with his arms, and Rollo jumped through, straight over the balcony railing. A few moments later, as Paul was leaning over the balcony looking down at what remained of Rollo, his date walked out. She said, "Isn't Rollo the cutest, happiest dog you've ever seen? By the way, where is he?" Continuing to look down, Paul replied, "To tell you the truth, Rollo seemed a little depressed to me." Frank got a bit depressed hearing all the sex stories from the other three in his usual Saturday foursome. Seems he was the only one having severe problems with his sex life, so he thought he would seek professional help and made an appointment to see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist asked him many questions, and it took 3 full sessions for the psychiatrist to truly learn about Frank and his somewhat normal background. However, the good doctor just couldn't determine exactly what was causing Frank to have so much trouble with having sex. Out of desperation, the psychiatrist asked Frank, "Do you ever watch your wife's face while you're having sex?" "Well, yes, I did once," Frank replied. "Tell me how she looked to you." "Extremely angry," Frank said. The psychiatrist finally felt he might be getting somewhere and asked, "That's intriguing. Let's delve further into this. You say you only saw your wife's face one time while having sex?" "Yes, that's correct." The doctor paused and looked through a reference book he had on his desk. He read something, then shut the book. "Frank, that is very unusual to only see your wife's face one time during sex. Tell me how it occurred where you saw your wife's face one time while having sex." "Well, she was looking through the window at us." "Man, my wife's kinky. She likes sex in her ear." "Friend, why's that, man?" "Well, every time I try to put it in her mouth, she turns her head." Little Johnny is in school one day when his teacher tells the class that she wants to hear each of them say a little about their families and specifically what is needed in their lives. The first student is a little girl. She stands up and says, "My family is mostly happy, but what we really need is a bit more money. My dad leaves for work before I am even awake, and he works hard until late at night to put food on the table. Money is needed in my family. More time with my dad is needed." The teacher is moved. She thanks the student and moves on to the next. A little boy stands up and says, "All we are missing in my family is my older brother. He went off to fight in the war a year ago, and nobody has heard from him since. My mum always waits for him by the window. My brother is desperately needed back in our family." The teacher is now tearing up. She thanks the little boy and moves on to the next student, eventually making their way around the classroom with one heartfelt response after another. Finally, they come to the last student, little Johnny. The teacher has come to expect antics from him, but gives him a chance. "Little Johnny, what about you? What is something needed by your family?" Little Johnny stands up briefly and says, "Nothing, we have everything," and sits back down. The teacher, slightly upset, asks, "Now, how is that possible? Each of your classmates have shared something. How can you be so sure that your family doesn't need a thing?" Little Johnny stands back up and says, "Well, I was watching TV with my parents late last night when my sister came home crying. She said, 'Dad, please don't be mad at me, but I am pregnant.' My dad disappointingly slapped his knee and said, That's all we needed.